There are certain laughs a person never forgets. Not the warm kind. Not the kind that fills a room. I mean the cheap kind. The kind people throw at you when they think you just paid real money for something dead. That was the sound in the county auction hall when Cal Harper raised his bidder card and bought the seized cash register for $65. 65. For a rusted machine with no key, a jammed drawer, a cracked number window, and a yellow sheriff's tag still hanging from the side. Someone in the back actually snorted. Another man said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You'd have been better off buying the table." A few people laughed harder at that. Cal didn't. He just walked up the aisle, slow and loose, like a man who had learned a long time ago not to hurry when people wanted him embarrassed. The auctioneer slapped the invoice onto the register. "Sold as is," he said. "No guarantees." Cal nodded once. Then he put his hand on the steel side of the machine and said something so quietly most people missed it. "Easy with the drawer." That got another laugh. The drawer was welded shut, as far as anyone knew. Hadn't opened in years. Maybe decades. And that's the part that bothered the room later. Because he didn't say it like a guess. He said it like a warning. And at the time, nobody understood why. Not the auctioneer. Not the deputies. Not the antique dealer in the third row who had suddenly stopped smiling at $40. And definitely not the two men by the coffee urn who had spent the whole morning making jokes about tax seizure treasure hunters. To them, Cal Harper was exactly what he looked like. A thin man in a faded work jacket. 58, maybe 59. Work boots with the toes scuffed white. A cheap ballpoint in his shirt pocket. Gray in his beard. A wristwatch with a cracked leather band he kept tightening with his thumb when he was thinking. He drove an old Chevy S10 with one mismatched mirror and a passenger door that only opened from the inside. The kind of man people stop really seeing. Until it's too late. The register sat on a folding table near the front. Underneath, a handwritten card that read, Lot 214, cash register, contents unknown, seized commercial property. That little phrase had done most of the work. Contents unknown. It was just enough mystery to wake up a room. Not enough to make anyone serious about it. At least not at first. The machine had come out of a roadside diner called Marlowe's, 12 miles west of town, right off the old state highway. If you were over 40 and had ever driven a truck route through northern Kentucky, you probably knew the place. Burnt coffee, heavy pie, waitresses who called everybody hon, a jukebox that worked when it felt like it. Marlowe's had been around forever. Then not forever. The owner died. The nephew took over. Taxes went unpaid. Suppliers stopped extending credit. The county stepped in. By the time the locks changed, the diner had already been half-picked clean. Booths sold off. Neon sign gone. Freezer dead. Grease in the vents. The register, somehow, was still bolted to a back counter under a layer of dust and fryer oil. No key. Drawer jammed. Nobody on the seizure team could open it. They brought it anyway, because that's what auctions do. They drag half-told stories into bright rooms and let strangers guess the ending. But Cal hadn't guessed. That was the difference. He had noticed something. Actually, 3 things. He noticed them before the bidding even started. And the first clue was so small most people would have wiped it away without thinking. A crescent-shaped patch in the grime near the lower right side of the cabinet. Not on the front. Not where customers touched it. Lower. Almost knee-height. A thumb-sized arc rubbed cleaner than the metal around it. It meant somebody had been reaching there. Again and again. For years. The second clue was weight. When the auction runner shifted the register across the table, the back left corner dipped harder than it should have. Not much. Just enough for Cal's eyes to narrow. Old machines speak in balance before they speak in sound. He learned that young. The third clue was the drawer itself. Everybody kept saying it was rusted shut. Frozen. Welded by time. But when the runner bumped the front edge, the faceplate gave the tiniest bounce. Not open. Not even close. But not dead, either. There was still spring behind it. Something inside still had tension. That's what Cal bought. Not the dirt. Not the steel. Not the story written on the sheriff's tag. He bought the tension. And if you knew where Cal Harper came from, that made perfect sense. He wasn't a treasure hunter. He wasn't even really an antique man. He fixed things. That had been his whole life. Cash drawers. Walk-in cooler hinges. Soda gun valves. Ice machine pumps, old fryer thermostats, anything in a restaurant, diner, gas station, or bait shop that jammed, leaked, squealed, stuck, hummed, or refused to die. For 31 years, people called Cal when something mechanical stopped behaving. He wasn't fast. He wasn't charming. He wasn't cheap either. But he had a reputation that mattered more than any of that. If Cal said a machine had one more year in it, it had one more year in it. If he said a compressor was lying to you, it was lying. If he told a diner owner not to replace a piece of equipment because the problem was actually a bent pin hidden behind a plate, 9 times out of 10 he was right. He could read where. That was his gift. Not books. Not people exactly. Where? A polished edge where there shouldn't be one. A screw head turned one too many times. A hinge that sagged from habit, not damage. He said machines were honest if you shut up long enough. His father taught him that in a grocery store with warped floorboards and a brass register that rang like a church bell. Cal was 12 the first time he saw his father fix a drawer nobody else could open. He remembered the smell more than anything. Dust, pennies, pipe smoke. His father never pried from the front. Never. He crouched, touched the side panel, studied the strain, then smiled like the machine had just confessed. Never fight the part that's already stuck, he told Cal. Find the part that still wants to move. Cal remembered that sentence at odd times in his life. When the service company replaced 3 veteran techs with app-based dispatchers and cut him loose with a handshake. When his wife, Susan, looked across the kitchen table after 26 years and said she was tired of living around broken things. When the shop lease went up. When his truck transmission slipped 2 months later. When the envelope from his mother's assisted living center came marked past due. Find the part that still wants to move. It sounded wise when you were a kid. It sounded expensive when you were 58. That morning, Cal had walked into the county auction with $117 in his pocket. Not in a bank account. In his pocket, folded in 2 sections. Gas money in the front, bidding money in the back. He had come for a stainless prep table he thought he could clean up and flip to a barber opening a shop downtown. But the prep table went too high. Then a meat slicer did too. Then a rack of aluminum sheet pans sold in a bulk lot to a restaurant supply guy from Lexington. So Cal stood there drinking burnt coffee from a wax cup and watching his chances disappear one number at a time. That should have been the end of it. Then they rolled out the register. And something in the room changed. Not loudly. Quietly. That's how real things change. A few heads turned. The auctioneer read the card. Seize cash register. Contents unknown. No key. Not tested. A skinny man in a denim vest yelled, tested by gravity. More laughter. The bidding opened at 20. A woman near the aisle offered 25 just for the novelty of it. A flea market couple pushed it to 30. Then it stalled. People like mystery in theory. They hate paying for it. That's when Cal noticed Brent Halpern. Brent was the loudest buyer in the room. Mid-40s. 2 white teeth. Pressed jeans. Sport coat over a black t-shirt like he dressed from 3 different mirrors. He owned 2 antique booths, a YouTube channel with more confidence than views, and the kind of voice that always sounded like it was selling something. All morning Brent had been performing. Mocking lots he didn't want. Complimenting lots he did. Talking over people. Calling auction runners chief. When the register came out, he made a face. Scrap, he said, but he kept looking at it. Not the front. The right side. That rubbed crescent in the grime. He saw it late. Too late. The bid hit 35. Brent lifted a finger. 40. Just that. Casual. Cal saw his own reflection in the cracked total window for a second. Tired eyes. Still shoulders. Then he heard his father's voice again. Buy what they touched. Not what they said. 45, Cal said. Now Brent turned. Really turned. Looked Cal up and down like he was trying to remember if junk men were allowed to interfere with richer people's intuition. 50. Cal didn't answer right away. That pause mattered. A lot of people think confidence sounds loud. Usually it doesn't. Usually it sounds like silence long enough to make the other person feel it. 55, Cal said. The room woke up a little. Brent smiled. Not kindly. 60. And there it was. That tiny shift. The one most people missed. Brent wasn't bidding to buy a joke anymore. He was bidding to stop someone else from buying it. Cal felt it immediately, which meant the gamble had changed. It was no longer about whether the register held anything. It was about whether Brent thought it might. Those are different questions. Cal tightened the strap on his watch. He had $52 left in bidding money. One more number, and he'd be done. He could feel the room waiting for him to act poor, to fold, to do what men in old jackets are supposed to do when sharper men lean forward. The auctioneer raised his hand toward Brent. 60 once. 65. Cal didn't say it loudly, but the word cut clean. And that's when a laugh hit. A burst of it. Immediate. Because 65 was such an awkward number. Not bold enough to impress anyone. Just desperate enough to amuse them. The auctioneer grinned. 65 I have. 70. Brent didn't answer. For the first time all morning, he looked annoyed. Not because of the money. Because of the ceiling. He didn't know what he was bidding against anymore. A fool? Maybe. A mechanic with a read on the machine? Possibly. A man willing to take it home and damage whatever was inside just to satisfy himself? That was the danger. Brent stared at the register another second, then leaned back. Your scrap, he said. The auctioneer dropped the hammer. Sold. 65. And the room laughed like the lesson had already been delivered. That's the thing about groups. They love an ending they can understand. Cal paid cash at the folding card table near the exit. The clerk counted the bills twice. He signed a receipt with that cheap ballpoint from his shirt pocket. A deputy tore the claim stub and handed it over without looking at him. When Cal picked up the register, he realized just how heavy it really was. He set it down again, not from weakness, from respect. Need a dolly? The auction runner asked. Yeah, Cal said. Then, after a beat, keep it level. The runner smirked. Afraid the millions'll spill out? A few people nearby heard that and laughed again. Cal didn't. He just waited until the dolly came. And if the story ended there, it would still be a mean little auction story. Old man buys junk. Room laughs. Everybody goes home. But it didn't end there. Because the first offer came before he even reached the parking lot. Hey, Cal turned. Brent Halpern was behind him, one hand in his coat pocket, the other holding sunglasses he didn't need because the sky was flat and gray. I'll save you the trouble, Brent said. 150 cash. Right now. Cal looked at him, then at the register, then back at Brent. That was quick. Brent shrugged. I like old commercial pieces. You didn't seem to. Didn't say I didn't like it. Said it was scrap. You usually pay 150 for scrap. The smile on Brent's face thinned. 200. Cal said nothing. A wind moved through the lot and rattled a loose campaign sign tied to the fence. Somewhere behind them, a trailer gate slammed. The silence stretched just long enough to make Brent talk again. Look, man, you made your score. Take it. My score. You paid 65, so now it's worth 200? Brent put his sunglasses on, then took them off again. That tiny little move told Cal more than the money had. He was rattled. Not much. Just enough. Cal tipped the register back onto the dolly and started rolling. Brent walked alongside him. 300. No answer. 4. Still nothing. By the time they reached Cal's truck, Brent stopped pretending this was casual. 500. Now, Cal finally looked at him. $500 was not small money to him. 500 meant the overdue balance at his mother's facility wouldn't turn red for another month. It meant groceries without mental arithmetic. It meant gas, and maybe the used Impact driver he'd passed up 3 times at the pawn shop. He could feel the number physically. That's how tight life had gotten. Money didn't live in his mind anymore. It lived in his chest. And Brent knew it. That was the ugly part. Men like Brent are good at smelling the exact price of another person's pressure. Cal rested his palm on the register. Cold steel. Sticky grime. Weight with a back left corner won his sink. He remembered Brent's eyes in the auction hall. Not on the front. On the side. On that rub crescent. Why? Cal asked. Brent smiled again, relieved to hear a crack in him. Because I'm willing to gamble a little more than you are. No, Cal said softly. Why this one? Brent laughed once. Come on. You had 20 lots today you ignored. Why this one? Brent's expression changed. Not much. Enough. You selling it or not? Cal opened the truck door. Not today. Brent stepped closer, then listened carefully. If there's anything in that register, and I mean anything, it's probably paperwork. Mold. Old menus. Maybe a nest. Don't start tearing it apart from the front like some internet idiot. You'll ruin the tracks. Cal turned his head slowly. That was it. There it was. The sentence Brent shouldn't have known how to say. Not tearing from the front. Ruining the tracks. That wasn't general antique talk. That was register talk. Specific. Experienced. Cal watched him for a second too long. Brent realized it a second too late. Then both men went quiet. A good story often turns on the moment someone says one extra thing. This was that moment. Cal gave the smallest nod. Appreciate the advice. He loaded the register into the bed of the truck with the runner's help, set old moving blankets around it, and strapped it tight. As he climbed behind the wheel, Brent spoke one last time. 700. Cal shut the door. The Chevy coughed, caught, and rolled out through the gravel lot. He checked the mirror once. Brent was still standing there, not waving, not smiling, just watching the truck leave like he'd let something get away that he understood too late. The drive back to Cal's place took 33 minutes. Longer if you counted the train. He lived in a narrow rental at the edge of town with a detached garage that leaned slightly left and smelled like oil, cedar shavings, and old extension cords. It used to belong to a machinist. Before that, maybe a drunk. The garage was where Cal kept the remainder of his life arranged into useful categories. A workbench scarred by burn marks. Mason jars of screws sorted by head style. A coffee can full of odd keys bought in bulk from estate sales. A bench vise with one jaw chipped. 2 shop lights. 3 jackets on hooks. A box labeled Mom's papers that he had not opened in a week because he already knew what was inside. Bills. Forms. A life slowly becoming administration. He backed the truck up to the garage and killed the engine. For a while, he didn't get out. He just sat there with both hands on the wheel. Rain tapped lightly on the windshield. He had $52 left in the house. Maybe less, depending on what was in the freezer. And in the bed behind him sat either a very stupid purchase or the kind of machine that made other men lose their composure in parking lots. Which was it? That's the question that gets people into trouble. Not greed. Certainty. Greed is loud. Certainty is quiet. It tells you to keep going. Cal got out, pulled the register into the garage, and shut the door behind him. No audience now. No laughter. Just the sound of rain on corrugated metal and the soft click of his shop light warming up. He didn't touch the drawer first. That mattered. Most people would have. They would have grabbed the handle and yanked, or jammed a screwdriver into the seam, or started attacking the front like frustration was a tool. Cal cleaned a square with a rag, found the maker's plate under the grime. National Cash Register Company. Older than he expected. He leaned closer. The model number was partly obscured by oil, but enough remained to stir something old in his memory. His father had serviced one similar in a feed store near Paducah. Not exact. Close. A proprietor's compartment model, maybe. Custom depth. Special order for owners who wanted a second reserve space separate from the till. Not common, especially not in diners. Now his pulse changed. Not faster. Thicker. He removed the side panel screws one by one. Original slots, mostly, but 2 had been replaced at some point with newer heads. Another clue. Someone had been inside the casing after manufacture. He eased the panel off. Inside, the spring assembly was dirty but intact. No catastrophic rust. The drawer rails were gummy, not fused. Old grease, sugar vapor, dust, nicotine, kitchen air. Years of it turning to varnish. That meant the drawer hadn't died dramatically. It had slowly glued itself shut. Different problem. Different solution. Cal worked without rushing. That was another thing people misunderstood about him. He wasn't patient because he was calm. He was patient because rushing had cost him enough times to leave a mark. He loosened the return spring tension half a turn. Cleaned the rail channel with a thin wood shim wrapped in cloth. Oiled the pivot. Pressed the release linkage with a pick. Nothing. Again, nothing. He crouched lower. Looked at the crescent rub from the inside angle. There. A lever arm hidden behind the bracket, worn smoother than the rest. Used often. Not by clerks. By whoever owned the place. He smiled despite himself. All right, he murmured. Rain thickened outside. An hour passed. Maybe more. At one point his phone buzzed on the bench. He let it. Then it buzzed again. And again. Finally, he wiped his hands and checked the screen. Unknown number. He answered. Yeah. A man cleared his throat. This Cal Harper? Yes. This is Mitch from County Surplus. Someone asked if we had your number. Cal said nothing. The man continued, a little embarrassed now. I didn't give it out, just so you know. But a guy called twice asking whether that register sale included contents. Did it? Card says lot sold as is. Contents unknown. No exceptions. So yeah, I'd say so. Who was asking? Didn't say. Sounded like he sells antiques. Slick voice. Brent. Of course. Cal looked at the register. Appreciate the call. He hung up and stood very still for a second. There's a moment in every good mystery when the object in the room stops being an object and becomes a pressure point. That happened right there in the garage. It wasn't just a machine anymore. It was information. And someone wanted that information badly enough to start calling county offices after business hours. Cal turned back to the bench. He didn't get excited. Excitement makes your hands stupid. Instead, he made coffee. Cheap coffee. Too strong. He drank half, came back, and listened. Actually listened. He pressed the hidden lever again while putting slight upward pressure on the drawer bottom from underneath. A faint click. So soft he might have missed it if the rain hadn't paused at that exact moment. He froze. There it was. The part that still wanted to move. He reset his grip. Pressed again. Click. A quarter-inch. The drawer shifted. Just enough to show a black seam where there had only been sealed darkness before. Cal exhaled through his nose. Not triumph. Relief. He slid a thin strip of plastic into the gap to keep the gummy grease from resealing. Then worked the drawer side to side. Millimeter by millimeter. He didn't yank. Didn't force. He coaxed it. The way you coax a stripped bolt or a scared dog or a hard conversation you can't afford to lose. Another inch. Then another. Something inside rattled. Coins. Old ones by the sound. He kept going. The drawer came open at last with a long, sticky sigh. And for one strange second, nothing happened. No burst of light. No miraculous music. Just the smell. Paper. Metal. Stale tobacco. Grease that had forgotten the decade it belonged to. Cal looked down. There was money inside. Sort of. A few loose coins. Pennies dark with age. 2 nickels. 4 quarters. A crumpled stack of small bills fused together at the edges. Ticket stubs. A dried rubber band that snapped when he touched it. That was all. He stared at it. Then let out one quiet laugh at himself. There it is, he thought. There's the lesson. $65 for a handful of dead change and a better story than outcome. He almost respected it. Almost. Then he noticed the depth. The till tray should have sat flush to the rear wall. It didn't. There was too much cabinet behind it. About 1.5 inches. Maybe a little more. And the underside of the tray had 2 finger wear marks that didn't match the grime pattern above. Somebody had lifted this tray often. More often than they opened the main drawer. Maybe. Cal reached in. The bills were brittle. He moved them carefully aside, lifted the coin tray. It resisted, then rose. Underneath was a steel plate. Not factory gray. Brass-backed and darkened. Secondary compartment. Locked? No. Latched. And right there, in the center, was the smallest flat pull tab you'd ever miss if you were looking too hard. Cal didn't breathe. He pinched the tab. Pulled. The plate gave. Beneath it sat 2 cloth bank bags. A long paper envelope. And a folded ledger sheet tied with string. For a second, the whole garage went silent in a way rooms almost never do. Even the rain seemed farther away. Cal touched one of the bank bags. Canvas. Dry. Stamped with the faded name of a local bank that had merged out of existence years ago. He opened the first bag. Silver. Not modern silver color. Real silver. Morgan dollars and peace dollars, stacked and wrapped in old paper rolls, some broken loose and heavy in the hand. He poured a few onto a rag. Dates from the 1880s through the 1920s. One with a Carson City mint mark. Then another. Cal sat down without meaning to. His knees had just made the decision for him. He opened the second bag. Gold. Not bars. Coins. Double eagles. Smaller eagles. Old Liberty heads and saints in worn flips, some marked in pencil decades ago. The kind of stash a person builds slowly when they trust metal more than institutions. He looked at the envelope next. Inside was a 1928 $500 note, a 1934 $1,000 bill, folded once and sleeved in wax paper, 3 silver certificates, 2 old bank deposit slips never turned in, and 1 note, handwritten in blue ink on diner order pad paper. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just practical. Weekend reserve. Do not leave an office. That was it. No confession. No buried family secret. No map. Just a working man's way of saying, I don't trust the front room. Cal read it twice, then unfolded the ledger sheet. It was a short tally. Sunday nights. Names. Payroll initials. Amounts transferred. Silver kept back. Bills removed. Over and over across years. Marlowe's hadn't used that hidden compartment once. They had used it as habit. A reserve till. Maybe during bank scares. Maybe during bad tax years. Maybe because the old owner believed if he couldn't touch it, he didn't own it. And when the place fell apart, when the nephew inherited the debt, but not the discipline, when the county came in and tagged everything, the one stash nobody remembered was the one hidden beneath the drawer everyone assumed was empty. Cal sat there in that cold garage with a gold coin in one hand and an ancient payroll note in the other, and he did something very human. He looked toward the house, as if someone should be there to see it. Susan, maybe. Years ago, before exhaustion turned every dinner into arithmetic and every repair into a reminder of what he hadn't fixed at home. She would have covered her mouth with both hands, then laughed, then cried a little from the shock and pretended she wasn't crying. Instead, there was just the hum of the shop light. Cal set everything back down carefully. Counted once, then again slower. Not to savor it, to steady himself. By midnight, he had a rough picture. 63 silver dollars. 8 $20 gold pieces. 4 $10 gold pieces. The large notes. The certificates. The register itself, once cleaned and documented, was probably valuable too. He knew enough not to guess final numbers in a garage. But he also knew this. Brent Halpern had not offered $700 out of charity. And if Brent understood even half of what this model was, the calls weren't over. They weren't. At 8:14 the next morning, Cal stepped out of the house with a mug in his hand and found Brent's business card tucked under the windshield wiper. On the back, in thick marker, $2,500 today. Call me before you do anything stupid. Cal looked at the card for a long time. Not because he was offended, because he was tempted. $2,500 in a single day would have changed his week immediately. His month, maybe. And temptation sounds smartest when it arrives disguised as practicality. Don't be greedy. Take the sure thing. Cash out. Avoid risk. Those are dangerous words when spoken by the wrong mouth. Cal carried the card into the garage and set it beside the open drawer. Then he called the only person he knew who still understood old commercial registers better than antique dealers did. Frank DeLucci, 72, semi-retired, ran a repair and restoration shop 2 counties over. Hard of hearing in one ear. Suspicious by profession. Cal and Frank had hated each other mildly for 20 years, which is how many tradesmen become friends. Frank answered on the 4th ring. You dead? No. Then what? I've got an old NCR with a proprietor's compartment. Everybody who calls me says that. This one actually does. Silence. Then model. Cal read off the plate. More silence. Paper shuffling. Then a whistle. Well now. What? Where'd you get it? County auction. Don't clean another thing until I see it. What's the register worth? The register? Maybe 6, maybe 9 if complete and honest. And if it's not just the register? Frank's voice changed. How not? Cal told him. Not every detail. Enough. When he finished, Frank gave one short laugh. Not mocking. Admiring. Somebody got old school scared of banks. How old school? Old enough to use gold and big notes. You need appraisal, documentation, and probably a lawyer to tell you the county can't come back later acting confused. Thought contents were mine. Probably are. Probably. Don't build your life on probably. Can you come? By noon. Frank arrived at 11:47 in a van with rust around the wheel wells and 2 magnifying lamps in the back. He spent 30 minutes examining the register before he said anything useful. That was Frank. He distrusted early conclusions the way other people distrust strangers. Finally, he leaned back, scratched his chin, and said, "You were right about the drawer." Cal let out the tiniest breath. Frank pointed to the side where mark. Hidden side release. Custom install. Owner access reserve, tray underneath, standard till. Restaurant men did this when they didn't trust staff, banks, brothers, or all three. Brent knew something. Brent, dealer from the auction. Frank snorted. Dealers, no stories. Mechanics, no patterns. They cataloged the contents item by item. Frank photographed everything. He found one more detail hidden in plain sight. Taped beneath the lifted tray, yellowed almost into the metal, was a tiny envelope containing the original spare key. Never used. That made both men grin. By late afternoon, after calls to an appraiser in Louisville and a local attorney who specialized in estate and property sales, the picture sharpened. Yes, the county sale language was broad enough that the contents transferred with the lot. Yes, documentation mattered. Yes, they needed formal valuation. No, Cal should not sell to the first eager man waving cash. That evening, Brent called from a block number. Cal answered anyway. "You got my card." "I got it." So what?" Brent exhaled. "You open it." Cal took his time. "Why is that your business?" "Because I know what that model is." "Then you knew yesterday." "I suspected, and still let me buy it." "You beat me by $5. There was a pause. Then Brent lowered his voice, dropped the performance. "Listen, I'll be straight. Those proprietor compartment registers sometimes have retained coins, keys, paperwork. Sometimes people hid real money. I've seen it once. Seen or heard about." Another pause. "Seen. How much?" "That's not the point. It is to me." Brent shifted tactics. 3,500. Cal looked at the old note on the bench. "Weekend reserve. Do not leave an office." "I'm not selling a blind," he said. Brent's tone hardened. "You think appraisers won't eat you alive? You think lawyers won't bill you to death? You got lucky hit. Take the clean money." Clean money. Men always call it clean when they want your uncertainty at a discount. "No," Cal said. Brent laughed once, sharp and unbelieving. "Then you're either already richer than I thought, or dumber. Could be both." Cal hung up. 3 days later, the formal numbers came in. The silver coins, including 2 Carson City dollars and several better date pieces, just over 11,000. The gold coins, based on condition and market, 31,800. The large-size currency and certificates, 9,400. The register itself, after careful conservation and documentation as a special order proprietor's compartment model from the late 1930s, 8,500, maybe more to the right collector. Total estimated value, before fees or taxes, right around $60,000. A little over, depending on venue. Cal read the appraisal twice, then set it down. $65 into roughly 60,000. The number was absurd. But what moved him wasn't the number first. It was the gap. The violence of the gap. How quickly a room can decide what a person is worth based on how he looks carrying something heavy. How certain people become when they see patched cuffs and a quiet mouth. How eager they are to laugh before the drawer opens. Frank wanted Cal to consign the coins through a proper numismatic auction. The lawyer wanted documentation filed immediately. The county clerk, when notified as a courtesy, made a face like she had swallowed a staple, but admitted the sale paperwork was clear. And Brent? Brent showed up in person. Of course he did. A week later, while Cal was wiping the restored side panel with a clean cloth, a silver SUV rolled up outside the garage. Brent stepped out holding coffee like 2 men might be meeting for a friendly negotiation instead of the continuation of a mistake he hadn't forgiven himself for. "You've been busy," Brent said, glancing at the register. "Sometimes." Brent set one coffee down on the workbench. Cal didn't touch it. "I heard numbers," Brent said. "People hear lots of things." Brent smiled faintly. 60. Cal said nothing. "Good for you," Brent went on. Honestly, it was one of those sentences that always means the opposite. Then came the offer. Brent wanted the register itself. Not the coins. Not the notes. The register. He named 12,000. Then 14 if Cal decided today. He said there was a Chicago buyer. Museum-grade collection. Prestige piece. Bragging rights in every syllable. Cal listened, waited, then asked the only question that mattered. If it's worth 14 to you, what's it worth to him? Brent looked away. Just for a second. There was again that tiny shift. Same as the parking lot. Same as the auction. He still wanted to buy certainty below value. He just wore a nicer price now. Cal folded the cloth. Not today. Brent sighed, this time like a man tired of pretending to be relaxed. You know what your problem is? Cal almost smiled. No, you take things personally. That landed in the garage and sat there. Because there was truth in it. Cal did take things personally. The laughter, the condescension, the immediate assumption that any man with overdue bills must also be available for a bad deal. But he also took one more thing personally. Craft. And craft was what had put the drawer in his hands instead of Brent's. I don't take the machine personally, Cal said. I take the reading of it personally. Brent frowned. The reading? You saw a story you wanted to buy. I saw where. For the first time since they met, Brent had nothing quick to say. He picked up the untouched coffee and left. A month later, the coin sold through a reputable auction. Not all at once. Carefully. The better pieces separated. The currency handled through a specialist. After fees and taxes and paperwork and all the boring adult machinery that comes after luck, Cal ended up with enough to do 3 things he had stopped allowing himself to imagine. He paid the balance at his mother's care center and set aside enough to keep her there comfortably. He bought a small commercial unit on the edge of town with 2 bay doors and a cracked sign frame out front. And he reopened under a name he hadn't used in years. Harper Equipment Repair. Not a big shop. Not a dramatic comeback. 1 bay for refrigeration and small commercial appliances. 1 bay for restoration jobs he actually wanted. The first sign he hung inside wasn't a certificate. It wasn't a framed appraisal. It was the note from the register, flattened under glass. Weekend reserve. Do not leave an office. Customers asked about it sometimes. Cal usually just smiled and said, old lesson. He did keep one thing from the find for himself. The $500 note. Not because it was the most valuable. Because it wasn't. It was simply the thing that best represented the whole strange chain of events. A bill too large for daily use. Folded once. Hidden quietly. Saved not by greed, but by habit and distrust, and a man who had learned to look where wear accumulates. As for the register, he didn't sell it to Brent. He didn't sell it to Chicago, either. Not right away. He restored it slowly. Properly. Cleaned, conserved, documented. When it was finally displayed at a regional collector's show 6 months later, people crowded around it. Not because it gleamed, because it held a story. And the story had already spread. $65. County seizure. Laughter in the room. Hidden reserve compartment. Quiet mechanic. People love stories like that because they make luck look poetic. But Cal would have hated that explanation because luck wasn't the whole thing. Luck put the register in the room. Experience told him where to look. Self-control kept him from taking the first offer. And dignity, plain, unflashy dignity, kept him steady while other people tried to price his pressure. That's the part most people miss. The real twist wasn't inside the drawer. Not completely. The real twist was that the poorest-looking man in the room was the one person there who knew how not to be fooled by appearances, including his own. A year after the auction, a younger mechanic asked Cal if the story was true. All of it. The kid had heard versions already. In one version, there were diamonds in the till. In another, bearer bonds. In another, the county tried to sue him and lost. That's what stories do once they leave honest hands. They start dressing themselves up. Cal just wiped down a compressor housing and said, most of it happens slower than people tell it. The kid laughed. So what's the lesson? Cal thought about that, then shrugged. Don't laugh before the drawer opens. Simple line, but stayed with people. Because everyone has been in one side of that story or the other. Either you were the person being underestimated, or you were standing in a room too comfortable with your own assumptions. And maybe that's why stories like this travel. Not because of the money. Not really. Money gets attention. Reversal gets satisfaction. But recognition. Recognition is what people stay for. That moment when the weak-looking person isn't weak. That moment when calm beats noise. That moment when embarrassment changes addresses. By the time the register finally sold, it went to a private collector for just under $10,000. More than Brent had offered. Less than Brent's mystery buyer probably would have paid after adding his markup. Cal was fine with that. He'd already won the only part that mattered. He had read the machine correctly. He had trusted the small clue over the loud opinion. He had endured the laugh long enough to hear the click. And sometimes, if you ask me, that's worth more than the number on the final check. Because life does this to people all the time. It hands them something covered in dirt, something awkward, something other people dismiss in seconds. A person, an opportunity, a second career, a last chance, a jammed drawer. And most walk away because the outside doesn't flatter them. A few stay. A few look closer. A few notice the rub mark near the hidden lever, the slight imbalance, the spring that still has tension in it, the part that still wants a move. Those people get laughed at sometimes, until they don't. So if you ever find yourself in a room full of certainty, watching everyone agree too quickly about what something is worth, be careful. Rooms are often wrong, and laughter has a terrible track record as a valuation method. Cal Harper learned that in public, then proved it in private. A $65 lesson, a $60,000 answer, and one quiet line that ended up being bigger than both. Don't laugh before the drawer opens. So tell me this. If you were standing in that parking lot and someone offered you $2,500 cash before you knew what was inside, would you have taken the money or waited to open the drawer yourself?